Adolescence is supposed to be temporary. The insecurity, the intensity, the volatility. We talk about it like weather that passes, but look closely at adults around you. The overachiever who cannot rest, the skeptic who trusts no one's intentions, the hyper-independent partner who struggles to rely on anyone, the perfectionist manager who reacts to small mistakes like threats. These don't look temporary. They look structural. We like to believe personality solidifies through choice, through preference, through maturity, but much of it calcifies under pressure. And the pressure often began early, not in childhood innocence. In adolescence, when awareness sharpens, status becomes fragile and the social world turns evaluative. Adolescence is not just hormonal chaos. It is the first sustained exposure to social judgment, hierarchy, and uncertainty, while the brain is still wiring itself for adulthood. That timing matters, because what repeats during that window doesn't just influence behavior. It becomes default architecture. This is where traits harden. Not randomly, but predictably. Look at the visible patterns. The student who grew up needing perfect grades to avoid criticism becomes the adult who equates worth with performance. The teenager who learned that vulnerability invites ridicule becomes the adult who hides emotion behind competence. The adolescent who navigated unstable households becomes the adult who anticipates crisis before it arrives. From the outside, these look like personality: driven, reserved, independent, cautious, but underneath they are adaptations to sustained pressure. This isn't melodrama, it's neural efficiency. The adolescent brain is hypersensitive to social evaluation. Peer acceptance and rejection light up threat detection systems more intensely than at almost any other stage of life. Status becomes survival-coded. Belonging becomes neurological priority. Now add pressure, academic competition, economic anxiety in the household, digital comparison, social instability, parental stress leaking into the home. The brain doesn't philosophize about this. It calibrates. If achievement reduces conflict, achievement becomes identity. If emotional control prevents embarrassment, emotional restraint becomes identity. If independence prevents disappointment, detachment becomes identity. Repetition builds pathways. Pathways become habits. Habits become traits. And by the time adulthood arrives, the origin story is forgotten. All that remains is the trait defended as just who I am. But adolescence isn't just socially intense. It's structurally unstable. You're old enough to be evaluated, not old enough to control your environment. You feel consequences, without authority. That imbalance creates a specific kind of pressure performance without power. And performance without power teaches hyper-awareness. You start scanning rooms, monitoring tone shifts, anticipating outcomes. The adolescent who grows up in unpredictable environments develops sharp pattern recognition. Useful, adaptive. But the brain doesn't automatically turn that off at 25. Hypervigilance matures into being perceptive. Emotional suppression matures into being rational. Overachievement matures into having high standards. The language changes. The mechanism doesn't. Zoom out further. Modern adolescence is not the same as it was 50 years ago. Digital permanence means mistakes don't disappear. Comparison is no longer local, it's global. Metrics are constant likes, scores, rankings, visibility. Evaluation is continuous. For many, adolescence became a performance stage with no backstage. Identity formation used to be experimental. Now it's archived. And when identity is publicly tested before it's internally stable, adaptation accelerates. You become careful, curated, strategic, or you withdraw entirely. Both are responses to scrutiny. Add economic uncertainty. Many adolescents grew up hearing about layoffs, recessions, debt, climate instability. Even if indirectly, that ambient anxiety seeps in. Security feels fragile. And when security feels fragile during formative years, Control becomes psychologically precious. Some chase control through precision and planning. Others reject systems, entirely mistrusting institutions that appeared unstable. Either way, adolescence becomes rehearsal for instability. And rehearsal turns into identity. This is where traits harden, because the brain favors what worked. If emotional restraint protected you from peer rejection, it gets reinforced. If competitiveness secured status, it gets reinforced. If skepticism prevented embarrassment, it gets reinforced. Adolescence rewards fast adaptation. Adulthood rarely questions it. But adaptation has a cost. The overachiever who equated love with performance struggles to feel valued without output. The hyper-independent adult struggles to experience support without suspicion. The emotionally controlled individual struggles to access spontaneous connection. Strength becomes rigidity. Independence becomes isolation. Skepticism becomes distance. Achievement becomes exhaustion. Not because the trait is flawed, because it was designed for a specific pressure that no longer exists in the same form. Adolescent environments are compressed, high stakes, peer dense. Adult environments are broader, less uniformly evaluative, more self-directed. But the nervous system doesn't automatically recalibrate. It continues solving yesterday's problem. This is the hidden trade-off. The teenager who survived social volatility becomes the adult who mistrusts stability. The adolescent who mastered self-sufficiency becomes the adult who experiences reliance as weakness. The brain confuses adaptation with identity, and identity resists revision. But the story goes deeper than individual households or peer groups. Entire generations experience shared pressure. When large groups of adolescents face similar instability, economic downturns, rapid technological shifts, institutional distrust, their adaptations scale collectively. You begin to see generational traits: higher anxiety sensitivity, greater skepticism toward authority, increased emphasis on personal autonomy, reluctance to commit long-term. These aren't moral failings. They are synchronized adaptations. When institutions appear unreliable during adolescence, institutional loyalty weakens in adulthood. When career paths look unstable, flexibility becomes virtue. When visibility feels risky, privacy becomes protective. What begins as adolescent defense becomes adult worldview. And worldviews feel rational. They are rational within the context that shaped them. But context changes. The adolescent brain is plastic. The adult brain is efficient. Plasticity allows adaptation. Efficiency preserves it. Which is why adolescent pressure matters more than we admit. It sets defaults before critical thinking about identity fully matures. You didn't choose your first coping style. You refined it. And refinement feels like authorship. This is why conversations about personality often miss the structural layer. We debate traits as if they emerged in isolation. Introvert, type A, detached, ambitious, guarded. But ask a different question. What repeated adolescent pressure made this useful? What uncertainty did this reduce? What threat did this neutralize? Now personality becomes less mysterious and more mechanical, not robotic, but patterned. Consider the adolescent who constantly moved schools, new environments, new hierarchies, new expectations. Adaptation required fast social reading and minimal attachment. In adulthood, that person may appear charming but distant, comfortable anywhere, deeply rooted nowhere. Or the teenager who carried adult responsibilities, early caring for siblings, mediating parental conflict. Competence was survival. In adulthood, that becomes reliability, but also difficulty relinquishing control. Or the adolescent who experienced intense peer scrutiny online. One mistake amplified. One awkward phase documented. They learned to curate. In adulthood, self-presentation feels strategic by default. Authenticity feels risky. These aren't personality quirks. They are pressure fossils, embedded in behavior. The key isn't to pathologize them. It's to understand the timing. Adolescence is when the brain is building predictive models of the social world. If that world feels competitive, unstable, or judgment-heavy, the model assumes that's baseline reality. Adulthood often provides more autonomy, but autonomy doesn't automatically rewrite early models. It simply gives them more space to operate, which explains a quiet contradiction many adults feel. They are free, yet tense, capable, yet guarded, independent, yet exhausted, because the pressure that shaped them ended years ago. But the adaptations remain active. This isn't about blame, not parents, not schools, not technology alone. It's about recognizing that personality is not formed in calm waters. It's formed in response to turbulence, and adolescence is often the first storm. By the time we call something just who I am, it has been rehearsed thousands of times, under watchful eyes, under unstable conditions, under evaluation. What hardened then feels natural now. But natural doesn't mean inevitable. It means understandable. When you see adult rigidity, you're often looking at adolescent survival refined. When you see extreme independence, you're often looking at early unpredictability. When you see relentless drive, you're often looking at conditional approval internalized. The traits are real. So were the pressures. Adolescence doesn't pass, it embeds, not as memory, as structure. And once you see that personality stops looking like fate, it starts looking like adaptation that stayed too long. Now you understand why.